I don't even know what information y'all have been given, and in fact, what's the name of this?
Too busy to busy.
How busy is too busy? Okay, that wasn't quite how it was presented to me when I was invited to talk.
Okay, so what's your percentage?
So I was asked to come and share with people how my parents raised me as a elite athlete who had a lot of long hours in the pool. How they kept my Catholic faith so important to me. So that's kind of what I prepared for. So hopefully, okay, all right. So just to start, thank you all for coming. I know, once again, I used to teach PSR, so I know that some of you are here, not necessarily yay, I get to go take some classes, spend a beautiful Saturday in a classroom, and I've had to get some of these too. But also, I was supposed to be someplace else with my husband, and my worst fear was that I was going to show up and no one was going to be here. So thank you for coming and making me feel like that I've made a good decision to stay behind. That doesn't mean that you're going to walk out of here just totally on fire with this new information. I was never a really great motivational speaker after my career in it or during my career. So I'm not a professional speaker, but hopefully my goal is to share with you some things that I do feel strongly about, that my parents did a great job raising me. And when I was asked to do this, even though I say no to 99.9% of things I'm asked to do, I just felt like, you know what, this is a wonderful way for me to honor my parents. And it's not often you get opportunities to really honor your parents. And I do think they did a nice job in keeping me grounded, keeping my Catholic faith important to me, despite being, challenged by outside influences. So the other declaration that I'm going to make is they did not have me submit what I was going to say to you all for approval. So I hope that what I share doesn't upset God above, nor the church. These are my opinions, these are my perspectives, and none of us are perfect. I'm going to admit that the way I've raised my kids is probably one of the perfect Catholic way that you're supposed to raise your kids. So anyway, and hopefully I don't need glasses. Look how large my notes are, so that I didn't need to put on glasses. But so I'll start with my background. And I was born in Louisville, Kentucky. I am the 10th child of 11, so very typical of that good Catholic family. Amazingly, I only have one brother, so 10 girls and 1 boy. And we were, as I said, a typical Catholic family that were, we could be 10 minutes late to Mass, and the second row of that Mass pew would be empty because they knew the Mahers were going to make it there. Somehow, they might be late, but they were going to make it there. And we would get kidded if we went on vacation and didn't come to Mass, said, man, we left the second row open for you guys and you never showed up. So, Catholic grade school. I grew up thinking that we were kind of poor, and maybe in a way we were, because they paid for 10 Catholic grade school, or 11 Catholic grade school, Catholic high school, and then, to be honest with you, the 9 ahead of me went to Notre Dame, or St. Mary's Notre Dame, and my parents paid for all of that. So I was the first one to not go to Notre Dame. They didn't have a great swimming program at that point, and if you can believe it, my parents gave me their blessing to go to the University of California at Berkeley.
Wow.
So I give my parents a lot of credit for letting me choose that, and I guess having confidence that I would make good decisions even being in such a crazy place. Let's see. So one thing that happened and that I think was very significant in my youth was my mom always said to us, if you're ever scared or ever anxious about something, bow your head and pray and ask God to be with you. And I don't even know exactly when it happened, but I'm going to guess first, second grade. I was home with just my younger sister, and I was watching the Rockford Files. And you know, how scary is that now? But back then, that was one of the scarier shows on TV. And I watched and I got to the end of the episode and I was scared to death. And I knew someone was in our house. I knew it. I knew there was a boogeyman in the house. And my mom's words came to me and I bowed my head and I said, please, Lord, you know, let me be okay. And the message I got back was, you're going to be okay. And it wasn't that, no, there's not someone in your house and that they're not going to beat you up or do horrible things to you. It was that it didn't matter what they did to you, you were going to be okay. And with that, I was able to turn off the TV, obey my dad's voice, don't go to bed without turning off all the lights. So I went down into our basement and I turned off all the lights and I went up and I immediately went to sleep. And I call that my born again experience. You know, we're in a Baptist area. That to me, and I didn't know it at the time, but that really probably solidified that God was real and that God loved me and that he was a loving God. And I think what it did to me from that point on was it allowed me to hear so many things from the voice of a loving God. So it could be a fire and brimstone, you know, sermon that we had, and others might complain, and I could hear it from a loving God. I could hear it from a God who wanted, you know, wanted me to choose right because it was in the best interest of me, and in the end it would make me happy rather than maybe someone else who heard, you know, because you're going to go to hell, or and hell's a horrible place. So I was really lucky, you know, didn't have necessarily great teachers, didn't necessarily have great priests, you know, all through my years, but what I did have was, when I heard anything, it was from the voice of a loving God. So I'm very grateful for that. But once again, I got to give my parents credit. They're the ones. My mom was the one who put that in my head, who planted that seed so that then I could have that experience that then changed my life. Also grew up with parents who were very positive about the Catholic faith. And, you know, I just so often remember, you know, Sunday morning or Holy Day of Obligation, do we have to go to church? And my mom saying, we don't have to go to church, we get to go to church. We get to go and praise God and hear his loving, you know, message and receive communion. And once again, I think so much of this is about planting seeds. And I didn't always feel that way. I didn't always pivot and go, oh yeah, great, you know, let's go. But it just little by little, I think, helped me as I went through the years to see things from a more positive view. Let's see. So then I had my swimming. I started swimming from a very young age. Back in that day and age, you could drop your kids off at a swimming pool and leave and go run errands, and you weren't considered, you know, bad parents. And so the swimming pool was free babysitting service for my mom during the summers, and she really would. She'd drop all of us off. And 8 in the morning, swim practice started at 8, so we'd be dropped off at 8, usually probably 8:05, 8:10, but the Mahers would come in full force. Swim practice, play all day, didn't have the money to buy lunch, so she'd sometimes bring peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, you know, buy us for lunch, and then pick us up, you know, 4 or 5 in the afternoon and take us home. So I grew up with all my siblings, you know, around the swimming pool, but from a very young age, it was evident that I had a knack for swimming. And, you know, I probably swam my first race when I was 4, probably won the 6 and unders as a 5-year-old. My stroke was the butterfly. So from a young age, I mean, people always ask me, how did you learn how to do butterfly? And I swear, there was a woman or girl a few years older than me named Mary White, and I saw her do it, and I thought, that looks really fun, and I'm going to imitate that. And I feel like I did. Now, she'll take no credit. She's like, there is no way in heck you watched me and learn, you know, did that. But, so we laugh a lot. We still sometimes exchange emails. But that's how I remember it. And so from a young age was put on relays, you know, butterfly. And so just going, in 8th grade. And I look at 8th graders now, I'm like, wow, no wonder I was so naive. I went and swam in my second nationals. First nationals, I did okay, I got 11th. Second nationals though, 8th grade, in April of my 8th grade year of school, and I won. And I did drop a lot of time. Not a lot of people saw it coming, including myself. And a little bit later, I'll tell you my parents' reaction to it. And so I won my first national title. A few months later, set my first world record. For the next 2 years, I broke my same world records. I set actually 2 different events, the 100-meter butterfly and the 200-meter butterfly. I rebroke those for several years, the last time being 16. And that was the last time I had set world records, even though I swam to the age of 23. So I really reached my peak at 16 for whatever reason, mental reasons, physical reasons. I don't think really a lot of people know. A lot of theories out there. But yeah, so I'm 7 more years. First Olympics would have been when I was 15 years old. You know, swimming, you can compare times. Good chance I would have won at least 2 gold medals. I also made the team in a freestyle event. I don't know how I would have done there. I'm not sure our relays would have won. We were up against the East Germans at that point, who had started their doping program. And so I'm not sure we would have won some of the relays I would have been on. But anyway, and so my second Olympics then was when I was 19, a year after I attended my freshman year in college, took a year off to train, and that's when I won 3 gold medals. And then continued to swim in college. I really enjoyed college swimming, loved my teammates, so I went back, swam at the University of California at Berkeley for the last 3 years. And then there was only a year left before the next Olympics. And once you're done with NC2A swimming, of course, then you're allowed to accept money and do advertisements or whatever. So with the East Germans boycotting the '84 Olympics, I really wanted to swim in '88 for a couple reasons, but mainly because it would be the first time I'd be able to race head-to-head in the Olympics against my main competition, the East Germans. And so I wanted to do that. I thought financially I could do it. But with '84, with them boycotting, there were a lot of Americans that won gold medals that maybe probably wouldn't have if you just compare the times. So I really didn't have this name out there to make a lot of money beforehand. So it was going to come if I won, and people assumed I would win in '88. Once again, I was still the world record holder. No one was coming within 3 and 4 seconds of my times. And I trained that year, and once again, for whatever reason, mentally, physically, I couldn't put it together, and I ended up 3rd in the '88 Olympics. And that was tough, and I'll talk about that a little bit later too. But that's kind of my swimming career. Got to do so many neat things with that. White House visits, did stuff with movie stars, got involved with Special Olympics. That's the whole Shriver-Kennedy family, which are who are fabulous. I was really, really lucky that I got to do so many neat things because of my swimming. Ending on that note, wasn't great, but not ideal, which I'll talk about that word in the future too. But certainly feel very blessed. Another thing though that affected my faith journey was a boyfriend, and he was a good Baptist boy. We started dating my freshman year in high school. We dated 3 years, and I mean, it was one of those, I was always boy crazy, so I should watch what I say, but I mean, I just assumed I was going to marry him. He assumed he was going to marry me, and everything was great. And he knew the Bible. And one of the first verses in the Bible that he shared with me was, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and everything else will be given unto you, and his righteousness, everything else will be given to you." And I take things very literally. And so I can tell you there were a lot of times that I knew I had choices to make, this road, that road. And I would remember that Bible verse and really feel like I was choosing the right way, and I would be rewarded. I mean, God would reward me, and now I look back and I'll laugh. I used to think it's because he rewards everybody, right? Now I look back and say, oh my gosh, my faith was probably so weak that he had to reward me. Otherwise, I may have not stayed faithful. And I really don't like to think that way, but it just worked for me. And one of the stories I tell that I think was most evident was after, and I really thought it was after 88, but the picture, I just saw a picture of it recently, and it was with President Reagan, was, to make money, you have to get in front of the camera. And even though I knew I was going back to college, you still are vying for being in the picture or whatever. And so we all lined up to have our picture taken. The whole Olympic team who went to the White House lined up to take our picture taken with President Reagan. And I knew, that I would have liked to have been in the middle in that picture. But I did that verse and thought, you know what, I'm going back to college. I'm not going to worry about it. So I walked to the end of the very picture, and I'm standing on the end, and the photographer puts up the picture and says, hey, you little girl in the end, you're not in the picture, I need you in the front. And he placed me almost
Perfect.
right next to Reagan. And it was just, within 60 seconds I'd been rewarded, that's the way I looked at it, for taking the humbler road, the humbler road, and just, so anyway, I appreciate that boyfriend, and it really helped me stay grounded through my swimming career. Let's see. So the greatest lesson I think my parents gave me was my faith. And I guess one of the things I really want to share is that I feel like the message that they gave me was, you don't have to spend more time in church praying or reading the Bible than you do swimming. But when push comes to shove, you have got to know that how you're living your life and whether or not you're being a good Christian person is so much way more important than whether or not you win or lose a race, or whether or not you got an A on a test, or whether or not you have a boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. And I so appreciate that they taught me that, and I guess let me share how they did that. They did that, and here's my story about when I won my first national title. So they're at home the meet was in Los Angeles, they're home in Louisville, and I probably called them at 8:30 at night Los Angeles time, which is 11:30 at night in Louisville. So they were in bed, and I called them and I said, hey, I swam tonight. Oh, how'd you do? I said, I think I did pretty well. And I thought I'd be bragging to come right out and say I won. So I think I did pretty well. And they said, oh, really? Well, like, what's well? And I said, I actually got first. And they're like, oh, well, like, was this age group, like 14 and under? And I said, no, this is everybody. And they're like, really? Well, did you make it to Mass this morning? Because it was a Sunday. And I was like, no, I didn't. And they're like, okay, well, that's really good you won. But when you get home, we'll take you to Mass as soon as the first opportunity we have. And they didn't get mad at me for not going to Mass, even though that would have been ideal. But they let me know that we were going to make that effort as soon as possible when I got home. They, like any Sunday that I would miss Mass, they would get up with me 6:30 Monday morning, Tuesday morning, whenever the first chance was, and they'd take me to Mass. I can't remember exactly how old I was, but I'm guessing middle school is the first time that swim practice interfered with family dinner, and we were one of those old-fashioned families, and you just were not allowed to miss dinner. And after dinner, we said a decade of the rosary every night, and they did not let me go to that practice, but they let me know that this was a really, departure from our tradition and what was important to the family. And so they said, okay, this is when you need to practice. I think God gave you this talent, but Mom will say the rosary, a decade of the rosary with you every night after you finish dinner. And she would. She might be doing dishes while I'm eating, but then I'd say almost every night she would sit down with me and say a quick deck of the rosary with me. When, those Mondays that you have holidays from school, Labor Day, whatever, my mom delivered Meals on Wheels for probably 45 years. And I would be the one to help her. She'd call the person that she normally did it with, and she'd say, my daughter Mary didn't get many opportunities. She's gonna do Meals on Wheels with me this week. And when recruiting trip to Cal Berkeley, once again, God bless my parents for letting me go to a place that would notoriously, wasn't exactly representative of a good Catholic population. But they said, let's find out where the Newman Center is. And you all may or may not know, Newman Centers are the Paulist priests, and they specialize in having a Catholic presence on college campuses. And they actually have a huge Catholic center at Cal Berkeley. So let's just go and figure out from where your dorm is to, where's the Newman Center. And it wasn't because, by God, you better go to Mass every week. It was, let's see. We know you're going to want to go to Mass. So anyway, those are, I feel like, the ways that my parents let me know by both example and with words that it was okay that I was practicing so much and that I would have to miss Mass sometimes. But that when push came to shove, my Catholic faith needed to be, number one priority. So what did that do for me? I've had some tough times in my life. I'm not going to pretend that I've had ultra. I have a sister. I think she would say the same thing, that my parents' faith passed on to her was most important. She's had an inordinate amount of tough times in her life, losing a child and two others that have had to fight cancer. She actually was a congresswoman, and a couple of these happened while she was serving in Washington, so that was really tough for her to deal. And I know that there's others, financial challenges and stuff, but I just got to tell you, losing in '88, it totally pulled the rug out from underneath me, and it did challenge my faith. I have to admit, and I'm not proud to admit this, that even though I heard that God didn't always reward, those who, like my sister. I think she's probably a better Catholic than me. But I guess I felt like I had been rewarded. I had all the success in swimming. I did well in school. I just had in my head that life kind of was black and white, and as long as you did the right thing, God was going to reward you. And it was really hard for me to understand why the first opportunity I had to win against my biggest competition and really prove myself and make some money and all that, didn't happen. I went down in flames. And yet, during that 3, 4, 5 years of transition to real life, I could be mad at God. There was one time I got engaged to a good Catholic boy, and really I wasn't one of those that had a career in mind during all these years. At one point I actually thought about becoming a nun, but if you don't become a nun, what do? You teach, right? You teach school. So I thought I was going to be a teacher, and found this good Catholic boy, and I was so angry with God when I had to call off the wedding, and it was during my pre-Cana, so good thing we all go to pre-Cana before we get married, because that's when the light bulb went off, and I knew I wasn't ready to make this commitment for life. So, but I was angry. I cried and screamed, and I was mad at God. But I could always hear my parents' voice in the back of my head saying, the most important thing is for you to keep your faith and keep praying and hope, and God will bless you. And it got me through those years. And honestly, I give my husband a lot of credit, because I had a lot of growing up to do even after I did get married 22 years ago to the man I married. And he helped me finish that transition, and not always in the kind, gentle way, but like, are you freaking kidding me? That's what you really think? but you know, I've always been able to have my parents' voice in my family, and I don't think I would have made that transition without that voice, and just believe that God is a good God, and that he loves me, and that somehow this was going to pass, even when I didn't know how it was going to pass. And it has stayed with me. You know, I've had a lot of the same or different challenges that everyone has in marriage. I mean, there were times where, you know, I didn't know, you know, what was up and down and right and wrong, what part of me was right, what part of me was wrong, what part he was right, what part he was wrong and stuff. But I was able to keep my faith and turn to my faith for peace, comfort, hope, all those things. And I go back to, those were seeds that my parents planted in me through the years. So, you know, I'm just very, very grateful. So I'm just going to end with one more thing, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers. But I guess the thing too, though, is while I make my parents out to be fabulous, love them to death, they weren't perfect. And, you know, whether or not what they taught me actually was what they were saying, or whether or not what they said I interpreted differently and correctly or whatever. But, you know, once again, I hold my parents up on a pedestal. I love them, and I think they did an amazing job. But I was not the only one in my family that needed some counseling to maybe unlearn some things that they, as I said, either inadvertently taught us, or they were just so, you know, they felt like it was the best way for us to see the world. And one of them was that life is black and white. That was one of the first things that my counselor was like, really? And you know, I think my parents were fine in letting me believe that life was black and white. And so when it turned really gray after I lost my first Olympics, and when it turned really gray, when I wasn't sure why, you know, this good Catholic boy on paper, I wasn't going to be able to marry him, I definitely needed help sorting that out and trying to figure out a different way to look at life. I'll tell you a funny story too. I loved my counselor in Louisville. I mean, that's where I finally hit rock bottom. I knew one of my sisters was going to this counselor, because she's the one that met me at the airport when I fell off the deep end, and actually my boss had to call her. You know. So anyway, she met me at the airport and said, you know, I have a counselor. I think she's really good. So I knew she was going to that counselor. But there was a family gathering, and we're walking along, and the two of us are talking about, oh, isn't Catherine great? Yeah, oh my God, she's helped me so much. And another of my sister says, are y'all talking about Catherine Ponte? Yeah. She's like, oh, I've gone to her too. My younger sister behind me goes, Catherine Ponte? Oh yeah, she knows my story too. Oh my gosh, four of us went to the same. Can you imagine? She never let on that she was counseling any of my other siblings. Wow. Can you imagine the 360 view she had of my family? You can pay millions for that. But, so anyway, I don't stand up here, you know, telling you that my parents are perfect Catholic parents. And I certainly have not been perfect Catholic parents for my children. I am very lucky in that, you know, my daughter right now is attending Catholic Mass regularly. She's 20 in college. She went her whole freshman year. I don't know if she went once to Catholic Mass her whole freshman year, but she's gotten back into it. I hope it's for her own self and not because she's a pleaser and she knows it pleases me. You know, we'll wait. My son's a freshman in college. He has gone to the Catholic Mass right near KSU, Kennesaw State, but I think he's a good boy. Amy knows my son. But, you know, once again, I am not up here saying I'm anywhere close to being a perfect Catholic parent. My parents weren't perfect Catholic parents, but I am so grateful that they instilled in me what they did and passed on the faith in the way they did. So one other thing, too is I learned something when I was getting ready to teach PSR. I think it was like to 5th graders, and it was going to be sex ed. And I said, well, I don't know if I wanted, I mean, I'm imperfect, you know, what do I do with these questions that these kids tell me? And I got the best piece of advice that I have used all the time. And that is, the person said, what you say to them is, I teach the ideal. I teach the ideal. So you don't need to know where I failed. I teach the ideal. And the ideal is, in this case, you know, in that sex ed, that you don't have sex before you're married. I get the messages you get, and I get that there are marriages that are really successful in which neither ones were virgins when they got married. But the ideal is you don't. And the ideal is, you know, the ideal would be you get up on Sunday morning and you can't wait to go to Mass. And you know you're going to hear a great sermon. You're going to love the music. That would be the ideal. We're in an imperfect world, and you're not always going to have the ideal. You know, ideally, I don't know, what are some of the other ones I've used with my kids? I mean, you can use it in politics. You could, you know, the ideal is this. But it's allowed me to be honest with my kids. You know, I'd love to tell you that I love going to Mass every Sunday. I can't always tell you that I go with that heart that you're supposed to have. That would be the ideal. But you know what? So often I go, I get something out of it. If nothing else, the Eucharist. I try to explain them the Eucharist and how important it is, and hopefully they've learned through their PSR lives. But it's just really helped me verbalize to them, be honest with them. You know, I can tell them how I'm feeling without lying, but always remind them what the ideal is, and that sometimes, you know, you'll hit the ideal. Sometimes you'll hit the ideal. You know, sometimes you do go with a happy heart and you understand the ideal. Sometimes you don't, and that's okay. But you need to know what the ideal is, what you're shooting for. So anyway, I guess that's all I have prepared, and I hope that a couple things have given you a perspective. That's what my counseling was all about. Was she was able to help me see something from a different angle, or verbalize something better, so that I could cope, handle, deal with whatever it was that was my challenge at that moment. So anyway, I'm happy to answer questions. Yes?
How many children do you have?
I just have 2. I have a stepdaughter, but I can't take credit for her. She's the most amazing stepdaughter. She's 34, but she had a fabulous mom, and her mom deserves all the credit in the world. And my husband. I think my husband was a decent long-distance father, but we have 2 of our own, a 20-year-old and an 18-year-old. And
No 10.
Huh?
No 10.
No 10. Honestly, though, that is what I really thought. I was going to be a stay-at-home mom and have a bunch of kids. And I was devastated when my husband first said to me, you know, I think I'm done. I was like, what? But he travels a lot, and we were in Peachtree City without any family, you know, new. First one was born, or we moved there when the first one was I was 5 months pregnant, so I didn't have a good friend base. So anyway, we stopped. I wasn't sure I could handle anymore as a single parent. So
I appreciate you bringing up counseling, because I think there's such a bad view of, and it's not just Catholic, it's Christian or a lot of religious view of anything to do with the mind or psychology or counseling is, you know, sort of a kind of a voodoo type, you know, or I don't know the word I'm looking for, but it's, so thank you for sharing that. It's important, because like you said, I mean, my parents grew up in parochial school their whole life. They went to parochial college. They were under the Dominicans. You know, Mom always said that you'll never meet a priest until you see one in the, you know, one of the brothers, or, you know, a certain type of priest they were used to versus secular or diocesan, I mean, priest. And so there's just all these things that they had growing up that we didn't have growing up. So now, you know, so like you're saying, you know, you grow up one way and now you're looking at the world a different way. How do we bring those together?
Yeah. And I think I would be really clinically crazy, I hate that's not the word, mentally ill, had I not gotten the counseling. You know, there's only so long that I feel like the way you're looking at the world and it's not working, after a while it does drive you crazy. You know, I mean, I do think counseling, prevents real mental illness. And, so yeah, I agree, and I really don't ever hesitate. What I do say is, I think you need a really good counselor. I think there's a lot of bad counselors out there. And, I think you really need one, you know, and I think different personalities, different, you know, need a different type of counselor. I had one that was fabulous.
Right, you're fortunate, because and from the counseling side point too, just so everybody knows, is if you're somewhere and you're meeting with somebody up to 3 visits, maybe 4, and you're not hitting it off, find somebody else,
Yeah.
because I think
Is that your background? And I think
Both of us are counselors.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think you see that in your practice.
We have some cards.
Yeah. But you see that in your practice of, you don't hit it
Yes,
off right
that's
away, and then
true.
people
Yeah.
stay too long, and it's not productive.
You're right,
Yeah.
and they're afraid to voice a concern and move.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
There's a personality fit, and
I
there are a
call
lot
it
of great counselors.
finding a good pair of shoes that you can journey with.
Oh,
And
yeah.
These aren't exactly the most comfortable, but yours look pretty comfortable.
Mine
So-
are- yeah, mine
So
are
we
really
want to
comfortable.
have somebody
My
we can
pants
do
are a
the
little
journey
high,
with, so.
Yes.
Okay, so I can relate to the idea of seeing things very black and white for a very long time. And I won't get into politics, but I went to a very liberal university and I wasn't quite as liberal. And it was strange and it was shocking to be placed in certain, like the poli-sci class, and you're thinking,
Oh.
okay, all of the bad people go to jail, so whatever they get in jail, that's, you know, they shouldn't have done it. But then real world hits you and people start asking those questions that you should have thought about maybe, but it never quite occurred to you, like, well, you do know the system is broken, right? So sometimes it gets jumbled up, and then world of gray happens and you have meltdown. Well, I think that since then, I have learned to operate in this world of gray for myself. But I see a lot of that black and white in my daughter. She's only 7. And part of that, I think, is her age group, because that's how they see things very literally. But I also see a lot of me in her, and I know that she operates much better with definites. So how were you able to give to your kids the, I guess feeling comfortable or learning how to maneuver through the gray areas? Or were you able to?
So I'll go back to one of my first declarations. I am not an expert. I'm here humbly before you. My kids are out of the house, but I still feel like I'm muddling my way. I muddled my way through parenthood, and I'm still good. But I think I use that word ideal. So I think you're right. I think a lot of kids want black and white, and it's almost good. I'm not. So I don't know at what age, y'all would probably know. What age do you introduce gray? But I think I would do it in my opinion, I'd use that. In my opinion, the ideal is this. But you never know. You always got to listen to the other side of the story.
And every child is different, so with the maturity, but I think there's a certain amount of security that children need to have some structure but
I think in
also
middle
needs to be
school,
grace.
adolescence, you tend to start having the cognitive ability to see the world with more gray. You start seeing those exceptions, those challenges that those kids aren't acting black and white as you would
Right.
expect them to. And then you have to hopefully have a family and a church that can show you the ideal to compare it to.
Yeah, I am married to a guy who's probably a little more black and white. So maybe we balanced each other and my kids, because he would, and I was able to pull him aside and say, I know how your dad feels. No, I wouldn't undermine it, but I'd give him a different view.
I have to say, even before middle school, my youngest son was very rigid in his, and to the point that we were up in Helen, and the only place we could eat was a bar, and he was flipping out. we're eating in a bar and there are beer signs everywhere. Oh, and it's okay, this is, and,
It's not ideal, I mean, you know.
Right, but this is where we have to eat, cause we're hungry, and so teaching him that we're not going to fall and go to hell because we did this, you know? So each child is different. The others were like, oh, look at these cool lights.
And that reminds me, we went to Longhorns when it first opened up in Newton, and we were waiting to go to table, and my husband and him talking, and he got his root beer, and then he saw a seat over there, so he took his root beer over there, and he sat there, and we're looking at him, sitting at a bar.
Yeah.
He's not a smoke.
Yeah.
So, but the thing is, it's a restaurant, but the thing is the situation was,
Yeah.
he's sitting at a bar with his mug.
With his mug. Do you feel like that answered your question, or helped you a little bit at least?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I have a question.
I'm sorry, this woman back here has had her hand up a little bit.
So I'm hearing you say that your parents were a great influence in you making choices, between church and the rest of your life, or putting your spirituality as priority.
Uh-huh.
And you've been a religious ed teacher. And what I'm seeing in the religious ed classroom is children come and then disappear and then come back. And how do I get the children to come and stay? Or at least, what can I do to encourage them to not lose sight? Because I'm not in the home.
Right. So I can tell you what I would say, and I'm not saying that I had great attention, I mean, no, I had those, but I always kind of said, I'm just meant to plant seeds. So they may not start attending mass every week. You know how many we hear that they come to CC or PSR, but then they never go to mass or whatever. But my job is to, when they are here, to try to plant a seed so that when they're 20, 25, 30, they go, oh, I remember when Mrs. Plant told that story about how she turned to her faith, or, you know. So that's how I did it, you know, and once again, you would use that. Ideally, you all come every week. I get, though, that you're dependent upon your parents to get you here. I understand that you all have other activities that are vying for your time and your attention. In this day and age, you know, this is boring compared to so many other things going on. Ideally, you come every week because this is the most important thing. And just hearing an adult, I feel like, say that passionately and with true belief, I think when they're 23, 25, whatever, and hit a wall, they're gonna go, oh gosh, maybe Mrs. Plant was right, and I need to get back on a faith journey. And, you know, you use the example, you know, a 4th grade education isn't gonna get you this great job. Well, a 4th grade education of spirituality is not gonna help you at 30 when, you know, you lose your spouse in an accident or your child is born unhealthy, you know. So you need to continue developing your spiritual life so that it is there for you, ready for you to really depend on when you need it. And that's not to say that they can't catch up. I mean, obviously, if you turn at 30 to the church for help, you're probably going to make up a lot of ground and get to be with that adult spirituality. But I don't know. I'm sure you have stories of friends, stories of people who you love that you can tell, in my opinion, that will impact these kids, and just plant that seed so that even if they don't start coming now, they'll turn to the church for help when they're feeling like the world's letting them down.
I have a question, unless you're gonna say.
Oh, you had
Yeah,
one, but.
yeah. So, with you growing up in a very strong Catholic faith, with your parents, how was it for you transitioning to California when you were trying to grow up, I guess, into yourself because you were away from your family, what you were used to, in college, in a new environment, I guess, growing into your own adulthood, especially into your life transition? How did you kind of cope with difficulties when it came to making certain decisions? Did you always feel like in the back of your head, did you have instances where you were like, well, my parents would want me to do this, but I feel like based on my own experiences, this is what I wanna do, or this is what I think is right, but I'm afraid of what they're gonna say, like.
So I stayed a pleaser for a long time. And, when I heard something I didn't like, it's probably normal. I remember a person living in the dorm walking with me to the Newman Center for Mass. He wasn't gonna go to Mass, but he was challenging me about God, whether or not God's really real and all that stuff. And I didn't have all the answers. And I think I just kind of tuned him out. Like, I can't remember his name, but I didn't do a good job of verbalizing, you know, I was still, so, I'm trying to think of a good example where I really didn't, as I said, my parents sent me to Berkeley. They had to have deep down been like really scared. I mean, I could have gone Stanford, Harvard, I mean, I could have gone to, and I just mentioned those private schools where maybe people were a little more mainstream in their thinking. And I chose Berkeley. So, you know, but that's not a good example where I knew I was going against their wishes.
No, but at Berkeley though, wouldn't you have come across situations, because it's such a radical campus, wouldn't you have made those decisions like every day?
Maybe. I really stayed a goody-goody. I loved watching people. That's what I said. You know, I'd sit on Sproul Plaza and I'd watch all the demonstrations. Dykes for Divestment. That was the one I just always remember and laughed at. So I gotta tell you, I mean, they did not like the guy who I was initially engaged to. I don't think I called off my wedding because of them. I then proceeded to date a guy who I should not have dated. And I kept it quiet from them because I knew that they would disapprove. So, I don't know. I mean, like, I don't know how to answer your question, to be honest with you, because I guess, I can't think of a good case where I really chose what I thought was right, even though they wouldn't have approved. I'm sure there's a case out there, but I'm sorry, I can't.
It's okay.
I can't.
I know it happens.
I mean, that
you
would
have it, but you can't think of it.
And I know I can tell you that it would have been very hard. I mean, I would have been very torn because I'm still a pleaser. I still like to please my husband. It's just, that's how I'm wired. And I love that book, Lean In, because to me it was all the subconscious reasons why I might be wired the way I am, or I see things the way I am, but luckily it worked out for me. I'm a very happy person, even though maybe I obeyed society's kind of education to me rather than myself. But anyway, I don't know. Gosh, I'm sorry. Let me. Maybe we'll have more conversation.
Help you.
Huh?
Said I might be able to help.
I mean, yeah. I mean, really, this part should be an open discussion.
Just do an open forum.
I mean,
yeah.
Just because I was always I wanted to do the right thing, but my parents would make me so angry because I felt like they were hypocritical. So, me and my infinite wisdom, you know, at 16, 17, 18, 19 years old, you know, you put a team behind that and you know everything, you know. So, you know, my solution to my parents not really approving of a person that I was going to date was, I'm not only gonna date them, I'm gonna move in with them, I'll show them, you know. And oh, the woe that followed for almost 10 years. It was very bad. What I would suggest is, before you make any decision, is think, would I be embarrassed if, and I tell this to my daughter, would I be embarrassed if anyone found out about this decision? Would I be embarrassed? And if you're embarrassed of it, then you probably shouldn't do it. I was embarrassed to have this person meet any of my friends, because when they finally met him, I could hear the whispers saying, oh my God, that's King Yeah, that, it was bad.
Yeah.
I didn't want him to come to church with me, I didn't want him to meet my friends, I didn't want to meet any of his people. Not that I thought that I was too good, but we were from completely different sides of the tracks, you know? So I never felt safe around his friends, but it was that thing, it's like if you.
So what I hear though is you didn't necessarily say that your decision was wrong, like maybe your parents were wrong, so you were making the wrong decision. But what do you do when you really feel like your parents are the ones who maybe aren't seeing things?
Like you're dating the Baptist, did that go well? Was that-
Ah,
I think that might have been challenging.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
think with a Catholic family your size would
Yeah.
be challenging.
Mhm.
They didn't love it, but they,
Adopted it.
you know, I think maybe, you know what, my parents were probably really good at not coming right out and letting me know that when they thought I was making a bad decision, maybe they just stayed quiet
Hid it in their heart.
and,
And
yeah.
Very.
I was gonna say too, there's also other people in your life that are very trustworthy. You know, there's probably people that have been your teachers or people you've met along the way that if you're in one of those places where you have your parents and you, then take you and go to other very sound counsel. You know people, they could be your best friends, they could be your parents' friends, they could be even a counselor. You know, you could take some of this and before you do what
Yes.
I have done in my life and a lot of other
Yes.
adults have done in their life, you know, if you already are asking that question where you are right now, then just ask the Lord, direct me to the people I need to speak to before I make that decision.
And then if you come to a decision other than what your parents would approve, you can be at peace. You know, I mean, hopefully then you would be at peace.
And you can bring it to them. If you're at peace with your decision and you've done the work for that decision, then you should be able to talk to your parents, even if the communications are a little off balance, because you will have developed a maturity of peace in your decision making. And the people that you'd want to go to would be able to guide you to that decision. If you don't have anybody in your life to do that, again, we're back to counseling, and you know you can go very short term and get a direction. You've had some short term clients.
And don't forget the priests. The priests are there. That's what they're here for. You know, you'd be surprised how. I mean, if they will go to your house to bless your car, they will.
One more?
yeah, I mean,
We just did a parenting seminar, and I know that myself, and it seems across the board that we kind of struggle with mommy guilt. And, how did your parents handle having 4 of their children that they knew of in therapy?
yeah, that was the old fashioned days where,
Nobody.
Yeah.
you know, we were
What is that
supposed to be the
like?
perfect family. But I think the same way, they just stayed kind of quiet and, you know, I think my mom finally kind of came around and said, boy, you know, I'd like to meet this woman, and, you know, and, cause all of you rave about her.
Probably wanted to go herself.
Yeah, really.
She's the
Very
one that had
truth be
11
told.
kids. I mean,
She wanted to make sure she got her word in.
Exactly, I want my side.
Yeah, yeah.
Not only that, she had 11 kids. Come on, most people only have 2 to
Yeah.
3. You know.
I have to imagine they had to pick their battles
Oh, I would
with
think
you
so.
guys.
You know what, and honestly, being the 10th child,
Yeah.
they knew what
Tired.
battles to pick. They were tired, and they probably knew what battles to
Yeah.
pick and which ones to not, so, better. So anyway, well, Ella, thank you for making this worth my while, and
Oh,
I
that was
hope
great.
I hope I've shared with you just something that maybe inspires you, helps you, or whatever, but, yeah, thank you for being a great audience.